Sagittarius. The best just happened. A special shift is here. Your home is filled with light. Something has changed, and not outside of you but deep within. You've been searching for signs. The right words, the right moment, the right confirmation that your journey hasn't been for nothing. But here's the quiet truth. What you were waiting for has already arrived. Not in the form of a miracle descending from above, but in the most subtle, powerful shift of all. You have finally stopped running from yourself. This isn't the beginning of your light. It's the realization that you were always the light. You just forgot. There was a time when you believed home was a place, or a person, or a dream you had yet to earn. But Sagittarius, home is wherever your spirit stops shrinking. And today, without any grand event, without any applause, something irreversible has begun inside you. You're no longer apologizing for existing. The sky sees it. The universe sees it. And the divine that's been patiently walking beside you all these years? That presence is now smiling because you finally turned inward and said, I am enough, not later, not if I succeed, not if they come back, right now. If your heart knows this shift is real, if your soul has quietly nodded during this moment, then stay. This message was made for you. And if it speaks to something you've always known but couldn't quite name, like this video, share it with someone still searching, and subscribe to the Zodiac Wisdom channel. Not for me, but as your own declaration to the universe. I've returned. And I'm ready to live in my light. Gate 1. No one looks down on you anymore because you've stopped looking down on yourself. Sagittarius, there was a time you walked into your own life like a visitor. Your feet touched the floor, but your soul stayed hovering, unsure if you belonged. You didn't mean to dim yourself. You were just used to shrinking, used to apologizing for being too loud, too passionate, too much. Used to offering only the parts of yourself that felt easy to digest, while tucking away the truth in quiet corners no one visited. You entered rooms with hesitant steps. Not because others didn't welcome you, but because deep down you hadn't welcomed yourself yet. You believed others would respect you once you earned it, once you had something to show, something to prove. So you stayed in the background, smiling, performing, even in your own home. But something sacred has shifted. There was no announcement, no fireworks, just a moment, a single ordinary moment, when you walked past the mirror, didn't look away, and for the first time in years, you met your own gaze without judgment. No one else saw it, but the universe did. The sky did. And so did the part of you that has always known. I am not here to ask for space. I am here to take my place. Self-respect doesn't come from lifting your head above others. It comes from no longer lowering your head before yourself. You've been through so much. You've apologized for dreaming too big, for earning too little, for making others uncomfortable with your truth. You've said sorry when you were exhausted, when you were grieving, when you didn't have it in you to pretend anymore. And still you showed up. Still you stayed kind. But now, without drama, without resistance, you've chosen something different. To stop hurting yourself in order to please others. To stop bending your back to fit into boxes you were never made for. To stop negotiating with your own worth. You are rising, not to prove anything, but to reclaim the dignity you never needed to earn in the first place. Sagittarius, you used to search for the sacred in distant philosophies, in spiritual texts, in signs and symbols far outside of yourself. But now you see it, the divine has always lived within you. It's in your breath. It's in the rhythm of your heart. It's in the quiet way you get back up, again and again, without asking anyone to notice. And this time you don't rise as a survivor. You rise as a sovereign soul, finally remembering. I never needed permission to be whole. There are no trophies for this kind of healing. No audience for the kind of courage it takes to look yourself in the eye and say, I forgive you. But the shift it creates is irreversible. Because the moment you stop abandoning yourself, everything begins to return. Peace, clarity, power, and a light that doesn't flicker in the wind anymore. And now something strange is happening. Your presence is changing. People who once overlooked you feel drawn to you. Not because you've become someone new, but because you've finally stopped apologizing for who you've always been. The light you tried to hide is starting to spill out. And that light, Sagittarius, is your quiet revolution. So if you felt this shift, if you've recently chosen silence over self-betrayal, rest over performance, truth over approval, then you're not just healing. You've already arrived at the threshold of something sacred. You're not walking back into your old life. You're stepping fully into yourself. And the most beautiful part? You didn't have to force it. You simply stopped leaving. Gate 2. The soul that once left is now knocking one last time. Sagittarius, there are bonds that never quite break, only shift into silence. There is a certain kind of connection, one not held by logic or proximity or time, that leaves without explanation, yet somehow never fully leaves you. You dream of them, not often but enough. Their name rises like a breeze through the stillness, not to bring pain but to ask a question your heart never got to answer. Should I forgive them? This is not about romance anymore. This is about the unfinished echo of a soul you once led into the deepest chambers of your spirit. The one who didn't leave with a door slammed, but with a quiet withdrawal that left the air heavy. You didn't chase them. You didn't beg. You simply learned to live with an absence that never gave you permission to grieve. Time passed. You became quieter, stronger, a little more careful with your joy. But still, there are moments, especially in the stillness before sleep, when their memory returns. Not to reopen the wound, but to bring something unsettled to completion. Sagittarius, you are the sign of truth. And truth, when buried, always finds its way back to the surface. That face in your dream, that phrase that echoes suddenly in your mind, that unexplainable pull toward someone you haven't spoken to in years. These are not random. They are part of a soul bond whose final chapter has not yet been written. In Buddhist tradition, this is called an unfinished karmic thread. In the Christian mystic heart, it is known as mercy, when the divine gives two souls one last meeting, not to reconcile but to release. Some people couldn't stay, not because they didn't love you but because they didn't know how. They were overwhelmed by your depth, frightened by your fire, unprepared for the honesty you brought into every shared silence. And when they left, it wasn't clean. It wasn't kind. It was incomplete. And now, years later, a whisper returns. Not in their voice, but in your own soul. You're not angry anymore. You're not aching. You're just standing before a door that's opening, not to let them back in, but to finally let the pain leave with them. Forgiveness isn't about permission. It isn't about inviting someone back into your life. It's about setting your heart free from the weight you've carried, often unconsciously, just to hold the memory together. And Sagittarius, you've carried enough. There will come a moment, maybe tonight, maybe in a quiet afternoon, when you feel the final breath of that connection pass through you like wind through trees. No drama, no confrontation, just peace. You won't feel triumph. You'll feel stillness. And that stillness will say, "This doesn't belong to me anymore." You may cry, not from hurt, but from the tenderness of letting go. Of finally saying goodbye to a story that defined you more than you ever admitted. Of realizing that you don't need to keep their shadow in your heart, just to remember the lessons. And Sagittarius, here is the most beautiful part. When you forgive, when you truly release, not for them but for you, the universe will respond. Not always with closure. Sometimes with a dream, a sign, a sudden clarity in your chest. You'll know it not because it feels dramatic, but because you'll feel lighter. You'll walk through your own mind and find no more corners hiding their name. You'll smile, maybe sadly, maybe sweetly, and then you'll place your hand on your heart and whisper, "I leave behind what is no longer mine." And in that moment, something new begins. Not because someone came back, but because you finally let yourself move forward, not as the one left behind, but as the one who chose release. This is not the end of love. This is the beginning of love that does not need to be haunted by the past. You are no longer asking why. You are simply free. Gate 3. God is never late, and you were never lacking. Sagittarius, you've often stood between worlds, between adventure and rest, between hope and doubt, between faith and quiet fear. There have been moments when, beneath your confident smile and restless energy, a question rose quietly in your chest. Maybe I was born to lack. You didn't shout it. You whispered it to yourself while folding a bill that barely covered what you needed, while standing in a small kitchen staring at a fridge that held just enough, while walking past store windows, not with envy but with hesitation, not because you didn't believe in abundance, but because you weren't sure it belonged to you. You've believed many things, Sagittarius. That maybe money doesn't flow easily for souls like yours. That maybe you weren't built for wealth. That maybe your generosity was the reason you were always starting over. You told yourself, "I don't need riches, I just want to stop worrying." And yet, even in the lack, you never stopped praying. You never stopped lighting the candle. You never stopped offering what little you had to someone who needed it more. Not because you had plenty, but because deep down you knew to give is to remind yourself that you are still alive. There is a blessing in that. A sacred kind of faith. Not the loud kind that demands miracles, but the quiet kind that says, even if I have nothing today, I believe tomorrow can still carry light. And slowly, without drama, without fanfare, that light is beginning to return. Maybe your bank account hasn't changed. Maybe the roof still needs fixing. Maybe you're still budgeting your meals. But something has changed. You're no longer afraid. You check your account with peace. You stretch what you have with grace. You sit in the same old kitchen and realize, this time, you're not waiting for someone to rescue you. Because this time you've remembered who you are. Sagittarius, you are the sign of freedom. But sometimes the greatest freedom is not having more. It's needing less. It's realizing that fullness isn't the weight of gold in your hand, but the steadiness of your breath in the morning. It's knowing that your worth was never tied to what you could buy, only to how deeply you could believe, even when the world said you shouldn't. There is a moment, a holy one, that happens when you stop comparing. When you look at your home, your life, your hands, and you see enough. You feel it not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer living in fear. This Sagittarius is wealth. Standing in a small room and smiling at the sunlight as it touches your skin. Holding a glass of water and whispering, thank you. Hearing your own laugh after so many days of silence and realizing it's still here. You're still here. You are filling up. And something strange happens when that shift takes root. People begin to notice. Not because you've become successful in the world's eyes, but because you carry something they don't. A quiet light. A peace that doesn't shout. A steadiness that says, I no longer need to strive. I am already here. God is never late, Sagittarius. The universe has not forgotten you. Your whispers in the dark have been heard. And now the path ahead is opening, not because of what you have, but because of what you've become. You don't need a miracle. You are the miracle. So if you've ever wondered when your abundance would arrive, know this. It begins the moment you stop believing you're unworthy of it. It begins the moment you stop chasing and start allowing. It begins the moment you say, even this is enough. And more will come when I am ready. And you are. Gate 4. You no longer wait for the light. You are the light. There will come a morning, Sagittarius, when you wake not because of an alarm, not for a deadline, not to chase something or prove yourself, but because something gentle within your chest whispers, it's time. Not time to run. Not time to perform. But time to rise quietly, fully as yourself. For so long, you believed that your life would feel different once someone saw your worth. You thought the pain would end when someone returned, when someone apologized, when someone chose you the way you always hoped they would. You gave your light away hoping it would be enough to keep someone close. You dimmed your spirit so others wouldn't feel overwhelmed by your brilliance. And when no one stayed, you sat in the quiet corners of your life and wondered, maybe I'm not bright enough. But here's the truth, Sagittarius. Your light never left. It simply waited, patiently, through your sadness, through your longing, through all the times you begged to be seen while hiding parts of yourself even from your own gaze. And now something is shifting. Not dramatically, not loudly, but sacredly. This time you didn't rise because someone asked you to. You didn't speak because someone needed comfort. You stood because your own soul asked you to. Not to prove anything. Not to fix anything. Just to be present. Fully. There is a kind of beauty that arrives when you finally stop asking the world to reflect your worth, and instead you feel it in your bones. You look around your space, your life, your ordinary morning and whisper, I have come home. And this time that home isn't a place. It's your own presence. Sagittarius, your journey was never meant to lead you to applause. It was meant to lead you back to your own light. And that light is not something flashy or dramatic. It doesn't burst into rooms. It doesn't demand to be noticed. It simply endures. It burns softly. It illuminates your life not with spotlight, but with steadiness. It guides you gently, reminding you that you are enough. Not because someone else said so, but because you finally stopped questioning it. You no longer need validation. You no longer seek permission. You are no longer chasing a future that proves your worth. Instead, you are living a present that reflects your peace. And maybe Sagittarius, that's the most sacred thing of all. Not that something miraculous happened, but that you finally began to see the miracle you've become. You walk into the room of your own life now with a different presence. Not asking to be noticed, not hoping someone stays, but knowing, no one needs to bring the light anymore. Because I am the one who lights this space now. And in doing so, your presence becomes healing. Not just for you, but for those who have quietly watched you all along. For the people who never told you how much your resilience mattered. For the ones who didn't know how to stay, but might still be watching from a distance, learning what it looks like when someone no longer abandons themselves. You don't need to go back. You don't need to be found. Because you, Sagittarius, are no longer searching. You are shining. And that light, it will never leave you again. Conclusion: you are the home you've been searching for. Sagittarius, if you've made it here, through the quiet realizations, the brave releases, the still awakenings, then something in you has already shifted. This wasn't just a story. It was a remembering, a sacred reflection of the journey your soul has walked, sometimes in silence, often in strength, always in hope. You've spent years reaching outward, searching for the right place, the right person, the right proof that you were allowed to take up space, to shine, to be fully seen. But the journey was never about arriving somewhere else. It was always about returning to the self you've quietly protected all along. And now, without needing anyone to notice, without a dramatic sign from the sky, you are standing in a moment that changes everything. Not because everything around you is different, but because you are. You no longer wait for light to find you. You've become the light. You no longer need someone else to complete your joy. You've discovered it was always yours to begin with. Sagittarius, this is your sacred homecoming. Not to a location, not to a version of the past, but to your own soul. You're no longer the one holding on for love that couldn't hold you back. You're no longer the one looking down in doubt. You're the one who rises. Not loudly, not for applause, but because the time has come. So let this be your quiet declaration to the universe. I am here. I am whole. I am ready for what comes next. And if these words echoed something real within you, if they stirred a truth you've buried or brought light to a place long in shadow, then let the universe know you've heard the call. Like this video, share it with someone whose soul is also remembering. Subscribe to the Zodiac Wisdom channel, not as a follower, but as a companion on this path of light, truth, and sacred becoming. Because you're not walking alone anymore. You never really were. You've simply remembered that you are the home, the light, and the miracle you've been waiting for.